Good morning, Dr. Hardy. It's exciting to have this moment with you and be able to talk about 10x transformation and rapid transformation and how we can implement and up-level our lives and to live our impossible dreams. And I'm just excited to have this moment with you.
I am happy to be happy to be with you, Wendy. I'm very excited to come to EO in Raleigh, Durham. So that's gonna be special. And just thanks for all you did to kind of move mountains to make that happen.
My pleasure, my pleasure. I love our chapter. I love entrepreneurship. I love building community. And one of the reasons that I wanted to have you come is I have this dream to be an Olympian in my life and in my business. And when I went to the Olympic Museum in Colorado Springs, I was curious if they had anything around the coaching for an Olympian. And for every one Olympian, you have 11 coaches. And when you start getting up in that level of leadership and of impact and of health and of healing, finding the right nuanced coaches to be able to give you that 2% shift has been a very elusive journey for me. And so when I read your book last summer, your 10X is easier than 2X, you brought that 2% shift that I needed to begin to up level and begin to grow and be able to take on my impossible dreams and begin to fulfill my potential. And what I share with people are your thoughts are thoughts like 20-year thoughts. I've kissed a lot of frogs, I read a lot of books, but your wisdom and your acumen and combining mindset plus practicality together has really been the Olympic coaching, nuanced coaching that I've needed to be able to up level my life and my business. And so I'm excited to share this with our community, with other entrepreneurs, with other leaders to be able to up level their lives and continue to impact the world for goodness. So thank you.
I love it.
So
I love it. It can be difficult. It can be difficult to filter the right coaches at the right time. Because, we all, when the student is ready, the teacher appears kind of idea. But yeah, you've got to be patient and you've got to have that high filter. And sometimes you have to filter through a lot of things to find the right right electrical signal that can take you to the next place.
I love that. Absolutely. Absolutely. So it was right leadership, right message, and right timing. So I wanted just to highlight a couple of things, go a little bit deeper with you today, just to whet people's appetite and help them dive in and be able to integrate your messaging into where they're at. This year I had an opportunity to hear Shali Basnet speak. And she was one of the Nepali women that was the first Nepali team of women that climbed Mount Everest. And she was sharing about on that climb for Mount Everest, there was this point near the summit where everything went wrong. And she was so close, but her dream was dashed. It was broken. She was just devastated and felt that everything was in vain. And in that moment of transition, some things happened and some internal shift happened. And in the morning, the opportunity came for her to climb back to the summit and for the dream to be fulfilled. And as she was sharing this experience, she said, I went from wanting to climb Mount Everest to knowing I was going to climb Mount Everest. And one of your principles that was life-changing was, what do I want? What I really, really want. And really discovering what I want. And I've been processing, how do I transition from wanting to knowing? And if that you had some moments where you've gone from wanting something to knowing that that is going to happen, and what would be some key skills to help solve what you really want?
I love it. I think it's huge. Obviously, it's going to relate to a couple quick things. One is getting connected to your own future self, which is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and studying. There's a lot of research on this. And not only getting connected to your future self, but being radically honest about your future self, but then also, interestingly, letting your future self be honest with you. sometimes,
Mm,
sometimes we don't want to face the truth. This is actually a massive aspect of addiction, right? One of the crucial aspects of addiction is that all progress starts by telling the truth. And so I think that it takes peeling away the layers of the onion. This is one of the things that we actually did talk about in 10x is easier than 2x, which is just the more you go through the process of even entertaining wants. It could be a small want, just being really honest about that. It's like peeling away the layers. And we use the analogy of the David by Michelangelo and how he talked about how he's just removing aspects of the stone to get to the point where he's got the perfect David. And I view going 10x as that process of becoming so insanely honest with yourself and others. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of journaling. It takes a lot of drafting, drafting like drafting a chapter. But I think honestly, I think a first step is just taking time to even just allow yourself to imagine your future self. This was a lot of the insight from a lot of researchers at this point now, but a lot of basically the main cognitive bias that people have is that they use their past and their present to create their future self. They use the present as the basis. And when you do that, you're really limiting your future self because you're basically assuming that your future self is very similar to who you are today. And I think that the reason that happens for people is because they've stopped allowing themselves to have imagination, to stop allowing themselves to wanting things. And so what we want to appreciate is that firstly, our future self is very different than our current self. Just like if you really did the work, you'd begin to appreciate how different you are from your past self. I'm different from who I was a year ago. And there's a lot of things that have happened even now in my life that my past self, even a year ago, couldn't have comprehended. And so you want to give your future self the space of being massively different than even you think they can be. And then getting to the playfulness of as Albert Einstein would say, imagination is more important than knowledge. And I think perhaps giving yourself permission to think that the impossible could be possible. One of the beautiful parts about that is that from your current vantage point, we just have to admit that we have very limiting assumptions of what's possible and that our future self will be in a different situation and will have different perspectives. And so I think those are some starting points, is just beginning to allow yourself to imagine again, allow yourself to test being honest with yourself, whether it's in the journal or with other people, and eventually getting really good at that. And you get better and better at it as you go.
That's that is absolutely amazing. When did you have the desire to dream? Imagination, I always use the word to dream. And like, what was there a moment where you realized that you could start dreaming again and imagining again that just like created this momentum of your future self?
So I think we go through phases because life takes us on journeys. One of the things that kind of hit me just even listening to you react to that last question was, and this is something I believe is that the sooner you become fully honest with yourself, the faster your life will, using the language of the book, the faster your life will 10x. And being massively honest with yourself and others is not just in word. It's also it's in application. And so one of the components of this book, Rapid Transformation, is the idea that not only do you want to operate from a new perspective, say it could be your impossible future self, but you've got to actually apply it, which means I use the language, you raise your floor, which is just you eliminate everything from your life that doesn't match that new future. And that's a high level of honesty. That's a high level of transparency. And it can be very difficult to begin letting go of things that you're attached to or that you think you depend on. But that level of honesty is what's going to transform your life. And back to just your question about allowing yourself to dream, I think that again we go through cycles. When I was a teenager, my life was kind of corroding. My father was a drug addict. He was very depressed from my parents' divorce, and the only thing I could actually do in those negative circumstances was think about my future self. It was kind of more like Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning, where he was in such a difficult circumstance with the concentration camps that he had to connect to a future beyond
Yes.
the concentration camps. And other people did out of necessity. They needed something to look forward to, or else their life just became meaningless and toxic. That was where I was at that stage in time, which was just everything was so rough that I actually needed a different future, even to just give me hope that things could be different. And that future actually pulled me forward and allowed me to get to places that I didn't think I could be. But I think there are higher levels than that where you kind of have to get yourself moving. Like if you just get yourself moving, even just get yourself walking, get your body moving, get yourself listening to good material, get yourself into the right environments, you actually kind of create a little bit of space where you can start thinking again, where you can stop being so reactive to the environment, so reactive to your existing situation, so reactive to the economy or whatever, and you start operating again from imagination. And that's when you start making much better decisions. That's actually one of the beauties of the research on future self is that your future self is the biggest indicator of your choices now. And Frankl said that, but I just think when you really start investing in your future self, getting excited about your future self, committing to your future self, and then letting your future self be that filter, really
It
interesting things
shifts
start to happen.
everything.
Yeah, you really start to build the momentum. And so it's really between you and you. And I think just little bits of progress get you going, but then you can really start to tap into the imagination. And then you can really start to use that imagination to dictate what you do now. And I've gone through cycles of that. I think that the first step is just thinking about the goal. When I was a graduate student, I really wanted to become a professional author. But then as I got a little bit further in that, I allowed myself to explore. Then I began to set bigger goals, goals that seemed impossible, like getting six-figure book deals as a graduate student, and just deciding to commit, even if it seemed impossible, deciding to actually go all in, deciding what's the worst that could happen, and then just committing and figuring out the way to get there. So in psychology, we call it pathways thinking, which is just finding the way. So
I,
I think it just takes practice.
I love that. I grew up with a lot of trauma. My dad died when I was 14 and had that suffering as a teenager as well. And having that gift of hope to be able to build. And one of my key moments was I realized that I had met the enemy and she was me. And that I needed to learn to put on my own oxygen mask and I needed to be an Olympian in how to put on my own oxygen mask. And even though it was paradoxical, the most effective way we can have impact is by putting on our mask first. So I really appreciate and resonate with what you are sharing.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things I've appreciated about being part of your mastermind, reading the 10X is the importance of who. And I appreciate like fundamentally when I talked about the want, you brought it back to our relationship with ourselves. The most important relationship and most difficult is that with ourselves. And the next most important piece from watching and listening to what you've been sharing is solving our who's. And one of the things when I went to your workshop in Austin was the gentleman who introduced you just talked about your authenticity and your vulnerability and that who you are on stage is who you are behind the stage and how he is honored to walk with you. And I really appreciate that you've been working on being your who. And I would love just a little bit of feedback as we are building our team and bigger the dream, the more important the team.
Yeah.
Um, and just how do you know when to allow people grace to grow as we grow and mature? And how do you know when it's time to release them to their destiny? And do you have
Yeah.
any like wisdom on for someone that's starting their journey of up leveling not only their who with themselves, but who with others?
Absolutely. It's a very delicate balance. I think that everyone needs grace for a time, but back to the idea of honesty and transparency. First off, being really honest with yourself. I think the more honest you are with yourself, the more honest you can be with the people you're either collaborating with or your team. This was something that I had to face recently was completely overhauling my team, even my assistant of 4 years who was integrated into basically every aspect of my life. I just realized that I wasn't being in integrity with my own impossible goals and the things that I wanted. And so it allowed kind of decay, admittedly, to occur. And that's part of the I guess you could say risk of success is that when you start creating success, you create a lot of margin for error. And that can lead to laziness, lack of honesty, if you're not careful, if you don't continue to have the higher vision and the higher standards. And so I think that I mean, I got to give myself grace. I know my future self gives me grace. I also give my past self grace, right?
Mhm.
I give my past self grace. So I think that grace is the key, but I think as long as the person is very honest and very aligned with what you're going for, and it's a clear alignment, and there's clear transparency, clear communication, clear accountability. And when those things start to break down, then the grace in my mind goes away. So for
Okay.
me, yeah, so for me, there's a lot of different levels of who's. Like if I think about my wife, for example, like there's so many. My view is that the right who's make the impossible possible, right? That's the whole idea
Yes.
of who, not how. Rather than asking how can this be done, it's like, well, who could make this happen? And the right who's changed the game. One of my favorite books on that subject is actually The 80/20 Individual by Richard Koch, who popularized the 80/20 principle. But he basically said that the thing that changes the world are good ideas and specific people. Like it comes down to that. Your level of imagination, your level of thought process, as well as the people
People.
that you yeah, and he talks about how 1% of the population have created over 99% of the influence and the direction of the world.
Wow.
And he also says that if you have the right partners or the right people, like quantum leaps can happen. And I've seen that. Obviously, I've seen that on my family. I've seen that in creating partnerships. I've seen that in people on my team. And so for me, I always use the future as the basis for the types of relationships I have. Rather than letting the past be the basis, I always let the future be the filter for the people in my life. Even Dan Sullivan, as an incredible collaborator, I felt like I could enormously provide value to him in a way that I didn't think very many people could. I could come in and take his ideas and popularize them. And, we basically have done that for over 1 million people. And I felt like that would be huge for his business. But I also thought the process of going through it would be transformational for me as well. So it was a transformational relationship. But I was not keeping score or anything like that. I was very excited to help Dan, but I also knew it was going to be a 10x for me as well. But there
Yes.
there came a point when my future got so big that relationship honestly stopped making sense. And rather than letting the past dictate my direction, I let the future. And ultimately, we both concluded that it was a good time to end, even though initially we thought we were going to do 10 books together. After three, it was just our futures went in different directions, and we just cordially decided, all right, like there's not unity of purpose here anymore. So let's be excited and grateful for what we've done, but it's time to move on.
I One of the things I love, Ben, of your philosophy is it really does take courage. Growth demands courage. And I love that courage is unpracticed confidence. And you don't know what you don't know. And so you practice confidence and you pivot and you adjust and you solve and you bless and you create.
Yeah, and your past confidence can only get you so far. Like courage, goes beyond your current levels of confidence and it takes you to places that are uncertain. That's why people avoid making the next courage move is because there is a possibility of loss and risk. That's a big aspect of courage is that there is risk involved and naturally human beings avoid risk and they avoid loss. And so part of the difficulty of committing to the new future is that it inherently involves loss of many aspects of your present life. Um, Probably present team, present situations. One of my favorite recent books is called The Crux by Richard Rumelt. He's taught strategy for 50 plus years at Harvard and UCLA. He wrote a book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, and then more recently The Crux. But one of the things that he talked about with organizations that actually commit to a massive change is he said that usually the change takes at least 5 years and the change could go a lot faster, but it takes a long time for the top leadership to admit that they have to overhaul most of the leadership team to do it. Just because most
Correct.
of the leadership team won't go to the next journey. And so usually it's the avoidance of that loss, the avoidance of ripping the band-aid off and then adding the new and better talent that stops people from the next level of growth. It's the difficulty of letting go of what you now have.
Absolutely. And to master our avoidance, we build accountability, we journal, we do our updates, we practice our skill set of brutal honesty with ourselves.
Yeah, and we actually allow
Yes,
ourselves we also allow ourselves to let the future be the determining factor for what we do. Back to the idea of future self, most people use their present self as the basis for their future,
yes,
whereas really it's a lot more psychologically accurate that the future is the dictator of what we do in the present. And when you take, to the idea of 10x is easier than 2x, when you elevate your goals to a 10x level, or, if you just apply the idea of impossible goals, by nature, that type of goal is very unknown to you. Like, even if you've accomplished things that in the past that seemed impossible, the new goal is unknown. And therefore, your past knowledge, your past assumptions won't get you there. That's actually what the research shows. Those types of goals shatter your assumptions, but also they force you by nature to up level. That they force you to up level and find new and better pathways and new and better people, because you can't do it with what got you here.
Yeah.
So to play
Albert
that game,
Einstein,
yeah.
Albert Einstein said the thoughts that got you to where you're at are not the thoughts that are going to get you to where you want to go.
And to the idea of 80-20 individual, that ideas and people are what create the biggest transformation. So if the ideas or the thoughts that got you here won't get you there, it's also the people,
Gotcha.
you
Yep.
know, at least in a business context, in a creative context. Some people will transform with you and they're just aligned for the journey. Um, and I've gone through multiple 10Xs with various people, personal, professional, but a lot of times you just have, the really hard part about it is that often you'll have to transform relationships and get into new relationships. And that doesn't mean that the former ones were, it doesn't destroy the meaning of the former relationships. It just simply means that the future is what creates the meaning in the direction of the present. And when you let the future create the meaning in the direction of the present, then it's an opportunity to align forces with new and different people that can create different transformations than what you did in the past.
That makes sense. It's challenging but freeing. And what I share with people is that we need to have a pain budget. It's an illusion that life is pain free. And it's learning how to choose our pain and decide what pain we want to go through. And whether we want to go through the pain of avoidance and fear versus the pain of courage and future self and hope and growth and entrepreneurship and leading to the bigger things.
This is why the faster you become radically honest with yourself and peel away the layers of the next David, the faster you'll 10X. And it takes a long time for us to just fully own that honesty because of the avoidance you're talking about. Psychology camps motivation into two categories: avoidance or approach. Avoidance means you're avoiding loss, you're avoiding risk, you're avoiding pain, and just the pain of even honestly just learning, creating new neural networks. If you're learning math, there's some degree of pain there because pain is just simply change, transformation. And so to avoid that, I have a broken finger right now and
Oh
I have to do
man,
physical. Yeah, I broke my finger in Kenya playing volleyball with my son and stuff. And so I have to go through so much like actual
physical
pain
pain.
to get this finger back to maybe even 80%, or I just don't do the PT. And now my finger is literally for the rest of my life debilitating. But the meaning of the future is what enables you to have a different lens on what that pain is. That pain isn't torture. That pain isn't
Correct.
punishment. That pain is beauty. That pain is progress. That pain, it has a different meaning because of the lens through which you're looking at it.
Agree. I actually just had my knee replaced, and it's going to be the first time in 14 years that I'm going to be orthopedic pain free. So I'm paying the PT costs of short-term pain and bone pain and surgery pain, but I am confident that it will lead to the gift of a life that is orthopedic pain free. But I'm paying the short-term pain right now, as you are with your pinky.
Yeah.
But
One just last quick thought real quick on this is that I thought I avoided releasing, I guess you could say, my assistant for probably a year longer than I should have because of the avoidance of that pain. And I just thought that the upheaval of removing her, simply, she was similar, like basically the CEO of my life. Like she like ran everything, had access to everything. And so I just felt like the uprooting of such a core element of my system and process would be devastating. And the shock was actually how fast the transition was with a more aligned and elevated who, that was more in alignment with my next 10X. And the
okay.
next 10X and the next future self truly just calls for not only a different level of character and honesty and transparency, but level of skill set. And I'm amazed at how quick the transition was once I was willing to rip the Band-Aid off.
I get surprised every time if I'm having a little bit of financial trouble. It's usually because I need to release someone. And it is always within 24 to 48 hours that everything shifts. It is the most fascinating I'm always surprised every time it happens of when you make the release, and it's not necessarily wrong person, it can be a wrong fit, different seasons, different growth, but the peace that comes, and it always surprises me what you're just saying, how fast the shift happens.
Totally.
So I really appreciate this time. I am excited because of just the gift that it is leadership, whether it's leadership in our homes, in our businesses, in our community. I know that you're working on your next book, Rapid Transformation. If people want more information, how do they get access to what you're working on? And just can you share a little bit about that, please?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I would say, at least right now, as we're talking, the easiest way would be to email support@benjaminhardy.com. In the near future, we'll have a website where people can watch a 30 to 60-minute free training that will walk people through two of my strategic psychology frameworks. One is just a new orientation of time. Another one is this frame floor focus model that's based on basically the science of achieving impossible goals and how you can use impossible goals as the most simple strategic tool to move yourself forward. So if you want more information, I would just email support@benjaminhardy.com. Honestly, that's where one of my team members is that's over that, and they'll get you access to the free webinar training.
Awesome. Dr. Hardy, thank you. Thank you for your investment in yourself. Thank you for your investment in your who. Thank you for your investment in me, in EO, in our community. And I'm just very honored that you took a few minutes just to deep dive a little bit on the most important topic of our future self and our imagination and up-leveling those relationships. So thank you for your time.
I'm excited to be with you in person.
Thank you. I am too. Thank you.